Our speaker this morning is a man I want you all to know. Now, you won't get to know him deeply, but you're going to get to know him a bit. His name is Peter Thorrington. He is the chairman of our board of trustees from South Africa. Peter has a vast and varied career in business. Spent a lot of time, maybe about 25 years, I think, with Opportunity International, which is one of the things we're really connected with as Westmont. Peter and his wife Monique have 9 grandchildren, 4 kids. The 4th came here to Westmont. And the thing I said, well, he's got a long resume. And I said, well, what do you want me to say? He said, tell him my life is really focused on Westmont College now. That's really what I'm about. Peter, we're glad that that's what you're about. So let's welcome Peter Thorrington to this chapel service.
Well, I guess it's light up here. It's very dark out there, but good morning to you all. When I was asked to talk this morning, they said, would you share your testimony? And that's quite difficult for me because very late in life, I made the most important decision we all make in life, which is to accept Christ. So my journey is a wobbly one. I was raised in South Africa, a country of many contrasts. As you see in that picture, the beautiful city of Cape Town, where I was fortunate enough to go to university. People often see South Africa in terms of a safari or beautiful countryside. But South Africa also is a place of very different lives and very different contrasts in terms of the people who live there. Enormous difference between wealth, enormous difference with poverty. And above all, I was raised in apartheid South Africa, one of the periods of probably one of the greatest injustice in terms of governments that have been around. Sorry about that, but obviously not something that is easy to reflect on. So in that background of apartheid, I was raised as a privileged white South African. And I went to a great Christian school. Ours was not a Christian home. My mother had seen her young sister become a nun at the age of 16, and she never forgave God to the day she died. So we were raised in a family where it was okay for others to have faith. However, we should be strong and we should not need it. And that was the home in which I was raised. I went to Michael House, which is an Anglican, at that stage, all boys, all white boarding school. And I was sent there not in spite of the fact that it was a religious school, but basically it's one which gave a very good education. During my 5 years there, we went to chapel every day, twice on a Sunday, and we followed the formalistic Anglican form of service. The message of Christianity, I've got to be honest, went straight over the top of my head. And I, along with most of my other colleagues, would have graduated from high school without any appreciation of the need for a personal relationship with Christ. Some years ago, I went back to the school for the 50th reunion, and I hadn't been back many times during the interim period, and I was struck by the difference in the school. Alan Smedley spoke in chapel here last month, and he had come along with Mfolosi and Lavuyo, who've just joined the school and are recent graduates from that same school that I was at. And Alan Smedley spoke of the miracle in South Africa, which was Nelson Mandela in the transition from apartheid to majority rule. And that was truly a miracle. However, in the same way, I feel a miracle happened at Michael House. The school from which Mfolosi and Lavuyo graduated, very different from the school from which I graduated some 50 years earlier. Today, thanks to Alan Smedley's leadership, more than 80% of the boys that graduate from Michael House do so having made a personal commitment to Christ. And that really is a miracle, and one which I personally can attest to. After Michael House, I went on, I did chemical engineering, I went to business school, came out into an economy that was growing at some 8% per annum on the back of apartheid. And at the age of 30, three of us decided that we could do this business. We were in the logistics business. We could do better on our own. So we started up our own company, which over the next 30 years morphed into an organization, UTI Worldwide, which we took public on the stock exchange here in the US. However, as I reflect on those times, they were times of self-indulgence, times of being utterly selfish. My attitude to apartheid was I voted for the opposition that were against apartheid, and I felt that was doing my job. So now, as I look at it, I have to reflect on the fact that I was part of the problem. I was certainly not part of the solution. A very humbling thing to admit to. Anyway, in my wobbly life early on, I did one good thing. I married Monique. But I did so still entering that marriage with very misplaced priorities. We had a whirlwind relationship. Our first date was in February. We got engaged in April and married in May and left to go and live in the UK in June. This is not a recipe that I advocate to anyone else. We therefore got to know each other after marriage, and thanks mainly to Monique's forbearance, we survived those early years of getting to know one another. But again, what I took into that marriage was my workaholic lifestyle. And I look at it now, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was on the sports field, or in my career, the only thing that drove me, and it drove me aggressively, was success as measured in man's world. Some 8 years after we had been married, and I was involved in international business, I was away probably more than half the time, but I came home from a trip, and Monique explained to me, as we drove from the airport to our home in South Africa, that she had become a Christian. So I reflected on this, and I thought, well, I know some Christians, that's probably going to be okay. And Monique really did basically accepted Christ, and from that day on it was into Bible studies, it was off to church, she got confirmed, she was on fire. However, I remained somewhat separated from that until our 4-year-old daughter looked me in the eye one Sunday morning and said, "Why do you not go to church?" And with that as a prompting, I then started going to church with them. We then moved to the US in the early 1980s, and again I went to church along with them, but in no way had I yet got the Christian message. We got involved with an organization called Marriage Encounter, and Marriage Encounter was wonderful. We went there and it was basically looking at marriage and saying, how can you make it better? And at that first weekend, for the first time, I recognized my appalling communication skills. And this is basically what the weekend was all about. And if you have a look at it, I was raised in basically an English home where it was you never shared your feelings, stiff upper lip, you put your head down and you go for it. Monique Armenian background, you share all your feelings, and you really do so in extroverted fashion. Hardly a recipe for great understanding. But anyway, this weekend made an enormous difference to ourselves, particularly to me, really helped our marriage. We then became involved with that organization. We became leaders in the weekend and so on. And it was actually at one of those weekends that I eventually awoke. It was like being hit over the head with a 2x4, and I suddenly realized I needed to make a commitment to Christ, which I did. So there is my beautiful, beautiful wife. However, what happened? And the answer was yes, there was that wonderful feeling of peace, wonderful feeling of at last understanding something which had been a mystery to me earlier. So at this stage, I'm in my early 40s. And there was a joy, but my lifestyle did not change at all. I was still the same workaholic, still working around the clock in very much a secular organization. At about this time, our lawyer, individual called Jim Hamilton, in my absence on one of my trips, called Monique and said he wanted to take us on a trip to see Opportunity International at work. We had been donors to Opportunity International for some years, primarily because Jim was an outstanding individual, had really helped me in my spiritual journey, and if Jim said an organization was okay, we were all for supporting it. So very reluctantly, we headed off to Costa Rica for an introduction to see Opportunity's mission at work in the field. And while we were there, we were in a room with Elsa. Elsa was a mother of 4 young children. She was a Nicaraguan refugee living in the barrios of Costa Rica. Very much a minority, living in very prejudiced surroundings. And she was sharing her story. She had bought an industrial-sized refrigerator with a $100 loan that she had taken from Opportunity International. Elsa spoke Spanish. Monique's a linguist. She understands these languages. She understands Spanish. So while she was talking, I was trying to get the translation from Monique, and the word that kept on coming up was sandals. So when the conversation had finished, I said to Monique, what was the story about the sandals? And she said, well, Elsa was explaining to us the reason she got up at 3 a.m. every morning, went into town, bought milk and meat, brought it back, put it in her refrigerator. She also rented out space in that refrigerator to people in her community. And the reason she did that is so she could put sandals on the feet of her children, because without putting sandals on, children could not go to school in Costa Rica. It was their way of marginalizing this community. And suddenly I sat there, I listened to that. Elsa was 10 foot tall. Peter was this size. And if I look at Opportunity had a very simple message, motivated by Jesus Christ's call to love and serve the poor. And as we traveled back from that trip, there were some passages that really spoke to me. From Luke 12:48, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. That to me, particularly that one, was a personal message and a command. And I looked at myself, and at that stage, to be frank, I was zero for Christ. Yes, I'd accepted Christ. Yes, I understood salvation, but I had done nothing. And I think if we look at James 2:26, what comes out from that is, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. That was Peter. So I served at Opportunity. It took some time. I had to go in and talk to my colleagues. We'd just taken the company public, To this day, they think I had a midlife crisis, to say I needed to make a U-turn. I knew if I stayed in that business, I would continue to do what I'd always done before. It was, in a sense, my drug, my dependence, and I needed to get out. So 3 years later, I did get out, and I went to serve at Opportunity for some time, 10 years, doing numerous jobs. Fundraising, I think Matt Neal might be here this morning. Matt and I certainly did fundraising here in the Santa Barbara community. I served on a number of the boards in Africa where Opportunity operated, and I just had the most wonderful and rewarding time in serving and supporting that organization. But let me now share with you the purpose that I now have and it's basically Westmont. I think if we reflect on Rick Warren's book, A Purpose-Driven Life, each of us needs to have a purpose. What is it that sparks you when you get up in the morning? What is it as you go to bed at night, you say, what did I do? And in my case, I've got to reflect, what did I do for Westmont? And Westmont has become my love and passion. Our youngest son, Mark, came to Westmont the year 2000. His two elder sisters had both gone to USC. And we are immigrants. We don't understand the educational landscape. And going to USC is what everybody else did in Southern California. So we were happy with that. Our two girls seemed to enjoy it. Mark was graduating from high school, and he wanted to play soccer at a college level, and his high school coach had actually been at college with none other than Dave Wolf. The introduction was made. We still knew nothing about Westmont. The high school coach drove Mark up to Westmont, introduced him to Dave Wolf. Mark came back and said he's going to Westmont. So we said, well, we'd like to have a look. We came and had a look, said, okay, that looks okay. And Mark came here for 4 years. We were uninvolved as parents. Yes, we came to the soccer games as often as we could. And yes, every Martin Luther King weekend, Mark, with 17 of his closest Westmont friends, would come and spend the weekend with us. And that was a real joy for us. But I was still working around the clock, and we didn't really get very involved. Anyway, about 2 years after Mark had graduated from Westmont, we were reflecting on things. And with that, I want to tell you a story, and it's a story about a person at Westmont whose name is Diana Palmer. Diana Palmer was a trainer, and she would do the physical therapy with all the sports teams. So Mark came here in his freshman year. He played soccer, loved it, really bonded with that team. And at the end of his first freshman year, he injured his back badly. And he had to sit out soccer for his sophomore year. And during that period, seeing orthopedic surgeons, others, and so on. And at the end of it, he went in to see an orthopedic surgeon and says, okay, you've got to tell me how I can get back to playing. And the orthopedic surgeon said, well, it's going to be really difficult. Surgery is not something that they wanted to advocate, but they came up with a routine that he would need to do before every practice, after every practice, before every game, and after every game. And each of those things took more than an hour. So Mark came back and said, this is, I said, well, how on earth are you going to be able to do that? Because you can't do it on your own. It was getting in and out of ice baths and other uncomfortable things. Anyhow, he spoke to Diana Palmer, and Mark played every game in his junior year and in his senior year. And Diana Palmer looked after him before every practice, after every practice, before every game, and after every game. So some 2 years after Mark gone out, Monique and I are talking, and at this stage, I just retired. I was now working with Opportunity, and I said, you know what? we need to go to Westmont College to say thank you. So we spoke to Dave Wolf, we came up and we sat down with Stan Gady, and we just wanted to say, look, we want to thank you. What Mark received was way beyond the call of duty. And that started a conversation, and a couple of years later, I was asked to be a trustee, something which I've thoroughly enjoyed doing these last 10 years. But undoubtedly, Diana Palmer was the spark. If you talk about the trustee role, in a sense, our job is to keep Westmont on mission. We're in no way involved with the leadership, nor are we involved with the managing of the organization. But I think in a similar way that a corporation has a board of directors to represent the shareholders, we as the trustees are there to represent the stakeholders of Westmont. And we do so very seriously because there's an educational organization, I think even of the Ivy League schools, who have lost their original mission. And we hold the mission of keeping Christ at the center of this organization as very dear. I want to tell you one other story, and concerns your communications professor, Deborah Dunn. So Mark graduates. Mark has been graduated now. He's been out of the school for about 12 years. If Mark is applying for a new job, he's recently gone back to graduate school to do a master's degree up in Seattle University. Every step he takes, the first person he calls is Deborah Dunn. Will you write the letter of recommendation? How do I get my GRE? She explained the kind of learning he needed to do to make sure that he was well prepared for the GRE. She even introduced him to the math department here so he could understand and make sure that he got the statistics part right. And Deborah Dunn does that for all her students. So Mark is not the exception. He has a group, all of those people, and we know them all. These are part of the group that used to spend their Martin Luther weekends with us. And they all rely on Deborah Dunn to be their support. And that again is just something that is highly exceptional. Our daughter Paula was a very good academic student, and she applied and was accepted to do a doctorate at UCLA. She could not get the USC professor. She had come top of her class at she could not get him to write the letter of recommendation so that she could go to UCLA. Now, she still managed to get through it all, but I think that is the kind of typical response that many institutions would give. And what I want to say is that Deborah and Diana are not exceptions. They are Westmont. And I think the examples I've set, be it on the staff level, on the faculty level, or on leadership, they represent what Westmont is all about. And as I reflect on that, I have two sayings from Mother Teresa, one of my heroes, which I always try and bear in mind on a day-to-day basis. When she was asked, how did she get to being the person she was, running that institution in Calcutta, which I had the privilege of visiting, and doing so under the most appalling of surroundings and environment, she said, I did what was in front of me. And that, I think, is something we can start and try and wait for that perfect thing to come up. But the answer is God puts things immediately in front of us, and that's what we need to deal with. And then I think the other thing she also says, we cannot all do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And I think that is the example that she gives to all of us, and I think you have many examples here at Westmont that basically mirror that approach. I love the new terms that are being used by Westmont, where they're trying to, I think, portray what is the purpose of Westmont. And I just love this thing of deeper thinking and wider impact. All of you are going to be educated here, and you're going to be equipped here to go out and serve and to lead. And when you lead, I don't think it's necessary that you have an aspiration to be a president or a CEO or something of that sort. You can lead from above, you can lead from alongside, and you can lead from the bottom. All you need to do is keep your faith and walk humbly with God, and your example will be the leadership. The other thing you all have is you have the opportunity here to develop all kinds of relationship with staff, relationship with faculty, but above all, relationships with each other. And I would just urge you to foster those, develop those, invest in those. Those are relationships that will take you through life. In May this year, we as trustees will see some 300 of you graduate. And some of you we've got to know, some of you we have met at dinners and so on, and many of you we've heard your stories. And what I think is great is each of you represent people who've taken advantage of the sports facilities here, the mission opportunities that are here, the opportunities to go globally to further your education, and clubs that you have joined. And as we sit there as trustees, it gives us the most wonderful sense of peace and confidence, knowing absolutely that each of you are going to go out and you are going to make a difference in the world. And that difference will be unique for each of you, but it does bring for us as trustees a wonderful joy. And with that, I would say, where do we get our inspiration? We get our inspiration from each of you for what you're doing now and for what you will do in the future. And with that, I would like to end with a benediction from Hebrews 13:20. May the God of peace equip you with everything good for doing his work, and may he work in you what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.